Hi, welcome to Dev Central, and today we're going to be using JavaScript to create a little pop-up modal. And if you didn't watch the last video and you want to skip ahead, I'll try and segment off little timestamps on here, and I will have a link in the description to my GitHub where you can download the HTML and CSS file from the previous video if you don't want to go and watch that. Okay, so we're going to start with the HTML part. You always have to put the elements on the screen before you can do anything else, and it's going to end up looking like this, where you can click create account, you have your email, username, password. When you click create account, it'll close this out and it'll console log all this information to the screen for us to look at so we can do the next part. Okay, so right now, as you can see, we have the main login screen, and if I type my name here, open up the console, if I type my name here and I press login, prints out my name. And now let's start working on putting the elements for the pop-up modal on the screen. Okay, so to start out, we're gonna make it its own div, and I'm gonna give it a class of modal. And so I'm going to do what I normally do in videos. I'm going to code all this out so you don't have to sit here and watch me code it. And then I'll talk about it in a second. Okay, so right here we have our heading so the user knows they're creating their account. Hey puppy. We have our X right here. That way we can use CSS to mess around with it, and JavaScript so when somebody clicks on it, they'll be able to X out of the prompt. We have our username. I'll bring the screen up right here. We have our username, which if you look on the screen, everything's here to the left. Our input, email, input, password, if you start typing in the box, it's all blanked out, or the little dots, because we have our type equals password instead of type equals text. And then we have our, oh no, I forgot our button. So I want to show you something real quick here too about the built-in developer tools in Chrome in any browser. Okay, so I just put that button in there, and if you look, you don't see the button. It's not on the page. And like you can see, I'm clicking, holding, and like highlighting this to see it right now until we use CSS to edit it, but like at first glance you don't think it's there. So I use Control-Shift-I. You can go up here to this and go to the developer tools also, but I'm gonna come over here, look at my HTML, and one second. So I'm gonna come over here to my HTML, see my div for my modal, click on that, and I'm gonna come to the button. And so if I come down to the button, you can see it's behind this other div, and we just have to use CSS to put it where we want it. So that's what we're going to work on next. So first thing we're going to do is get that modal class and give it a background color of black and then a text color of white so we can see the text, just so we can see it on our page. Okay, so we've given it a background color here, and the text is white so we can see this now, but it's put behind this login container, and we want to bring it to the front. So we're going to have to give it a position, and we're going to have to use a Z index. I'm going to say position, I'm going to put fixed, I'm going to say Z index, I'm going to give that a 1. And so if we refresh it, you can see that it's smaller now. And let's move it over so we can see that it's actually over top of this. If we minimize it, you can see that it's over top of this. But let's start moving it towards the center of the screen. Actually, let's just give this an absolute. And save that. Okay, so now let's start messing with this width and get to the same size as the other one. So I'm going to say width is equal to 60 VW, which is vertical width. I'm going to say my height is equal to 35 rem. And let's refresh it. Okay. So it's bigger, it's going to cover this, and that's good. So now let's move to the center of the screen by saying margin left auto, margin right auto, and then we're going to say left and right and give those a 0. Refresh our page. Okay, so now it's in the center of the screen. That is great. And let's push it down from the top, because that looks terrible. So I'm going to come up and say margin top and give that a 20 vertical height. So refresh. There we go. That's better. Not if your viewport's smaller, but let's see if we... There we go. Okay, cool. So I don't like how it's so square and boxy, so I'm going to give it a border radius. Come down here under the color, say border radius, probably give it a 25, or let's get 15. So border radius is 15 pixels. Let's see how pretty that looks. Okay, that's looking really good. And now let's start centering and putting all the stuff in here where we want it. So I am going to put another div around all of this stuff and see if I can't just center it at once. So come back to here in my modal. I'm going to say div, give it a class of give it a class of content. That way in our CSS we know it's all the content in our, let's say modal content. So we know it's our modal's content in this login. Copy this. Okay, so save this. We're going to come over here to our CSS. We'll say dot modal underscore content. Let's start with our text and say text align center. So it pushes everything to the center. Looks a lot better. I want to, I like the padding, but let's look at this X and see what we can't do with that. So I'm going to come back over here and I'm going to give this a class of close. Save this, come back to here, dot close, and let's make it red so that way it just stands out. You know, you can close it. Give it a font size of, let's try 24 pixels. See how that looks real quick. Okay, that's pretty good. And let's push it to the right. So we're gonna say, okay, so we're going to float that X right. That way it's pushed to the outside of everything. There we go. Refresh it just because I already did it, just to check. And let's get rid of some of this margin top. Let's look at it in here real quick. Okay, that's pretty good, but let's push that X up. So I'm going to say margin top. And I am going to give it a negative... Try 140 pixels. See how that starts. Let's start there. It should be good. Okay, so that's too high. Go down to 170 or 100. Okay. Give it a 75. Let's try that. Okay, that's just about perfect. I kind of want it just above this close account, so that way when you look at it, you know it stands apart from everything else. So give it a 65, 10 more pixels maybe, we'll see. Okay, and then let's say margin right, and well, let's give it 7 pixels, see how that looks. Okay, so overall, I like it. We're just trying to get the basic idea of this down, and there we go. So now we're gonna start working on the JavaScript part. Okay, so for our JavaScript portion of this, the first thing I want you to make sure of is that in our modal class, in our CSS file, the display is set to none. And now, over here in our HTML file, if you can open up the page 2, look at your create account text right here. We want that modal to open up when we click on create account. So we're going to do a couple different things here. We're going to start by giving this a onClick function. And you do that just like I have it right here. You say onClick in one word is equal to, we're going to say open underscore modal with parentheses. And you want to put that in the create account p tag. Next thing we're going to want to do is give this modal div a ID, and we're going to set that to modal with a capital M. Now over in our JavaScript file, we're going to want to create a variable that will come into here and grab this ID and then manipulate it on this file. So what we are going to say is var for variable, give it a lowercase m, and we're going to say that is equal to document.getElementById, and then in the parentheses we're going to say modal with a capital M because that's the ID we want. Now that we have that variable right there created, we are going to want to create that function that is our open modal, and we're going to say modal with a capital M and say dot style dot display is equal to block. And I don't think it needs parentheses. Let's see, or quotations. Nope. Yeah, you need quotes around this. So do single quotes. Save that. Now refresh our page. Okay, so I had to make this capital M. It was lowercase. That's why that wasn't working. But now you can see that when we click create account, we can open the modal, but there's no way for us to close it, and that's what this X is here for. We want to be able to close it when we click that X. We need to create another function so that when we click on this X, it'll close out our page again. So let's come back over here to our HTML, and you can see right here on my X, I have an onClick that has a function of close handler. So I'm going to come back here to my file for my JavaScript, say function close handler, parentheses, do this, and then we also need to say modal dot style dot display is set to none. Save that, refresh. There we go. Now we can click on that X, it'll close the page. I don't like how it's this cursor where it looks like you can text or type in a text box. So if you don't know how to, I will show you how to change that, and that is by, let's see. So I have a class of close, so I'm going to come over here to my CSS file, go to close, and give it a, what is it, cursor pointer. Let's look at that. Okay, so yeah, there we go. That fixes that. And now I have a little challenge for you, and I want you to make it so when you click on create account, it'll close this all out. But that's the end of this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and thank you.